Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180 with your host Clay Kerner, and I'm Marty Pay. We have a real treat for our listeners today. In studio, we've got a guest host, an old friend of the program, Brandon Martin, and by phone we have Andrew Klavan, who Brandon will introduce in a moment. I've got to tell you a little story first. Most of you know Brandon from the Bakersfield Business Conference. When Clay was going in for his knee surgery, we asked Brandon to join us for a couple weeks as a guest host. And I told him, pick whoever you'd like to interview. You know, just think outside the box and who would you like to interview if you had the opportunity to. So Brandon mentioned Brian Calais, who we interviewed a couple months ago. And the second name on his list was Andrew Klavan. So we had to bring Brandon back as a guest host just to help us interview Brandon. Why don't you introduce our guest?
Sure. My Andrew Klavan has given me just about more hours of enjoyable reading than any other popular genre writer I've discovered, and I'm very happy to share him with our audience. I read a book years ago, I think, called Man and Wife. It wasn't a hard-boiled crime genre book. It was an interesting book about the pursuit of truth and romance, really. It was a great love story. And a couple years later, I went to the Santa Barbara Tea Party because I was practicing law in the city of Santa Barbara in the Montecito area. And up on stage was Andrew Klavan. I hadn't explored his other books before, but here was Andrew Klavan giving a speech at a Santa Barbara Tea Party. All of a sudden, I felt the kind of camaraderie that you have with somebody when you're a conservative in a world of liberal pundits, and particularly when you work for the law firm I did in Santa Barbara. It seems like everybody in the world is liberal. Here is Andrew Klavan. I didn't know he lived in Santa Barbara. And he was profound when it comes not just to writing fiction, but also when it comes to talking politics. Went on to discover a book called Empire of Lies, in which his voice, his narrative voice is not just conservative, but fascinating to listen to. People listening on the radio probably know him from True Crime, the movie with Clint Eastwood. He did the novel. Don't Say a Word, another adaptation of a novel he's written, became a successful movie. But for me, his recent books for young adults have really captured my imagination. I don't have as much time to read fiction as I used to, but I'm thoroughly enjoying them. He also has a new book that Marty and I have both read called Identity Man. Love to talk to Andrew about that. If anybody hasn't checked out his work on PJTV, it's definitely the time to do so. A lot of authors and celebrities are all over social media and Twittering and that. Andrew doesn't do as much of that, but he does have just about the best presence online of any author I've seen. It's an incredible platform. Go to PJTV and check out Klavan on the Culture after you listen to our interview with him here today.
Andrew, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thanks very much. It's nice to be here. And I appreciate that lovely introduction.
You know, that was about a 2-minute introduction there. That was a good...
Yeah, I couldn't stop.
Yeah, we almost have to break here before the first introduction. I have to. Your book, Identity Man. I'm a big books on tape kind of guy, and the first question Brandon asked me when I was in the middle of your book was, how was Andrew's voice on the book? It was fantastic. You've got the perfect voice for that type of book. And I'm a big nonfiction reader. This is the first novel I've listened to in years, and it was fantastic. It was just it kept me spellbound the whole entire time, and I had no idea where you were going with this.
Oh, well, thanks very much. You know, I've listened to authors read their books on tape, and frequently I'm in the car when I do, and I've almost fallen asleep and driven off the road. So I just kept in mind as I was recording it that I wanted to keep people alive throughout the entire book, and I think that gave it a little extra energy. Well,
tell our listeners what the new book's about.
Identity Man is about a petty thief named John Shannon who gets himself in a bind, and he's hunted for a murder he didn't commit, and the police are closing in on him, and he knows he's facing possibly lethal injection. And suddenly he gets a text from a mysterious stranger who makes him this offer where he says, listen, I'm going to give you a brand new life, a new face, a new name, expunge all your records. And of course he's desperate, and he takes this offer, and he finds himself trying to start a new life in this city that's been absolutely destroyed by racial politics and corrupt politics, and he soon finds that he's being hunted even more dangerously than he was before.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, this is the first book that I've read of yours that's been, well, it's not the first book that's been political, but certainly the most openly political novel that we've seen from you. Empire of Lies had politics in the narrative, but this is very openly political. Did you fear that you'd be blacklisted, or in terms of the art community and the community in Hollywood, was being a conservative openly in writing this book something that scared you or frightened you?
Well, when I finished Empire of Lies, my last adult book before this, I seriously looked at myself in the mirror and said, just be prepared, you're never going to win another writing award for the rest of your life. I've been nominated for many awards, and I've won many awards, and I just thought that's the end of this, because the structure of the critical structure and the award structure is such that it really does tend to filter out openly conservative authors. So I was ready for it, and in fact, a lot of that happened. Before Empire of Lies, my books were routinely won wonderful reviews in really over 100 venues most of the time. When Empire of Lies came out, I got one major review that called me a right-wing crackpot, and that was it. So I'm aware that there is that conservative. Let's put it in the other way. Conservatives have failed to create a cultural infrastructure that supports artists who have a vision that's in keeping with what I consider to be basic Western values. And so, yeah, you pay a price for it. But to me, I got to be honest, being a writer, it seems to me the whole job of being a writer is to try to put forward your vision and whatever you think is the truth, and to sit down in the morning in front of your computer and try to disguise that, or tell people lies or say things that aren't true to win praise. That just seems to me completely antithetical to what my job is.
Our guest is author and screenwriter Andrew Klavan on Taking Care of Business, Kern Radio Newstalk 1180. Do you think conservatives have let go of the public square and just left it up to the liberals? Because you watch most movies and read a lot of books, and all of a sudden it just seems like their point of view is the norm, and anything different from that is the point of view that's not normal.
Right. I mean, that's until about 5 years ago, I think conservatives were really cowed. There is a blacklist in Hollywood. It's not a list that they pass around, but it's just a simple aspect of the system. You go in to sell a product, to sell a screenplay, and you find people are attacking America or dissing, the last president, President Bush, and you just find you're in a hostile environment to sell your screenplay, and anything you say that comes out of your mouth is going to condemn you. The same thing is true of reviews, which are very important, especially to writers. You know that if you write something openly conservative, the big, most important venues, the New York Times, the New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, they're all going to hammer you or ignore you. And so that's been very dispiriting to people who want to be in the arts. But over the last 5 years, things have begun to change because people have gotten very loudmouthed about it. Not just me, but guys like John Nolte, who is on Andrew Breitbart's big Hollywood website. All kinds of people have started to kind of push back. And if you look at the things that are coming out now, you find that things have actually changed in the last couple of years. You look at the major movies, and you have movies like The Blind Side and The Incredibles and Toy Story 3, all of them supporting what I would call classically liberal Western values. Not only those are big hits, but you also look at innovative movies like 300 and The Passion of the Christ and Gran Torino, and those are also pictures that support those values. And it's true if you look at the two best English-speaking playwrights, David Mamet in America and Tom Stoppard in England, both of them openly politically conservative. So it really has changed. There's a long way to go, and conservatives can be a little bit Philistine about it, a little bit slow to support the arts. But it is happening.
That's a good point. I'd forgotten that David Mamet came out of the closet as a political conservative a couple maybe a year or two ago. It's fascinating. Some of the openly conservative fiction that I've read, frankly, isn't very good. I'm not talking about Klavan fiction. I'm talking about fiction that it sounds ideological. It almost sounds as characters open their mouths and Rush Limbaugh comes out. Is it more difficult to write from that perspective? It seems like liberal screenwriters or novelists are able to implicitly or talk genuinely about their politics within the context of their art. But is there more of a struggle if you're a conservative novelist?
There's a little bit more of a struggle in two ways. I mean, one is that conservatism is a little bit more complicated than liberalism. Liberalism is a kind of an emotional appeal that simply assumes that it's the government that is going to have to answer all, solve the problems. But we all kind of agree that there are problems. Everybody knows that poverty is a problem. Everybody knows that there are unfairnesses in every system. The conservative worldview, a little bit more tragic, a little bit more independent, just has to create itself every time all over again and explain itself all over again. And that accounts, I think, for some of the preaching, which I agree you hear in too many conservative books and movies. The other problem we have, and this is, I think, much more solvable and will go a lot further to helping us get past this, is that conservative intellectuals tend to pay attention to governance, the economy, education. We tend to build think tanks that deal with those problems, the tax structure. We have no think tanks that deal with the arts. We have no awards for artists. We have no critical facility for praising them and raising them up. We have no grants for artists who support Western culture. And so people who are smart, people who are talented, tend to go into other things. They tend to go other places. People go where the love is and they go where the money is. When you look back over classical literature, you see the great age of English poetry with John Keats and Wordsworth. Those were the days when poetry was a bestseller, Same thing is true of Shakespeare's plays. That was the form of entertainment, and the great movies of the 30s and 40s. So I think we need to create a more welcoming infrastructure for conservative artists, and you get away from that. You'll get guys who are better at doing what they do and just telling the story and letting the values kind of rise up through the story, which is really what you have to do.
Andrew, when we come back, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about identity politics. I'm going to hold you for one more segment if we could, okay?
Great.
This is Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.